Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really a massive and absolutely crucial area, the axial musculature.
Hmm.
This is the core system. It basically dictates everything from your posture and breathing to, the little expressions on your face. It's totally different from the appendicular muscles that move your limbs.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we're really focusing on Chapter 10. And our goal is to give you a solid framework. We want to pull out the location, its function, what it does, and probably the hardest part for recall, the innervation.
The nerve supply.
Exactly. The nerve supply for the four big axial muscle groups. So if it's on the axial skeleton, if it moves your head or spine or helps you breathe, we're going to cover it.
And that distinction is so important, right?
Exactly.
Axial is about positioning your head, your neck, your trunk. Appendicular is all about moving your arms and legs.
Right. And we'll be visualizing this using that classic anatomical pattern.
Yeah.
Origins in red, insertions in blue. It just helps to see the action.
So what's the plan? How are we breaking this down?
We've got four logical groups, basically sorted by location and function.
Yeah.
First, muscles of the head and neck.
Okay.
Then we'll go deeper with the muscles of the vertebral column. After that, the oblique and rectus muscles. Think of the trunk walls and the diaphragm.
And the last one.
And we'll finish up with muscles of the perineum and pelvic diaphragm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into group one, the head and neck. This is all about, well, survival, right? Communication and feeding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the most obvious function here is from the muscles of facial expression.
The ones that let you smile or frown.
Exactly. And what's really unique about them is how they attach. Most skeletal muscles go bone to bone. These, however, they originate on the skull, but they insert directly into the dermis.
Into the skin itself.
Into the skin and the fascia. So when they contract, they move the skin. That's how you get an expression.
And the biggest group of these is around the mouth, I assume?
Yeah, you've got the orbicularis, oris. That's the one that closes your mouth, lets you purse your lips. And then there's the buccinator.
Ah, the buccinator is fascinating. It's a multitasker.
It really is. It pulls your cheek tight when you chew, so it keeps food from getting stuck. And this is key, it's the muscle that creates suction for an infant to suckle.
And here's the big connection for memorization, the nerve supply.
The crucial link. All of them. Every single muscle of facial expression is innervated by the facial nerve.
Cranial nerve, 7. And
Maybe
7.
That's it. So if you see a muscle moving the skin of the face, you know it's nerve.
But hold on, NVI does expression, but the chewing muscles right next door are handled by the trigeminal, NV. Why the split? They're so close together.
That is a great question, and it really comes down to their jobs. The facial muscles are just moving soft tissue, skin. It's for communication.
It's delicate work.
It is. The muscles of mastication, on the other hand, they have to generate huge amounts of force to move the mandible at the TMJ. They need a much stronger, dedicated motor supply, and that's what they get from the trigeminal nerve.
Okay, so who are the main players for chewing?
The big powerhouse is the masseter. That gives you that powerful jaw elevation.
Yeah.
Then the temporalis helps with that and also pulls the jaw back. And then you have the pterygoid muscles, medial and lateral. They're for that side grinding motion.
Lateral excursion.
Exactly. And, this brings us to a really important clinical update.
Oh.
The temporalis muscle. It's super important for surgeons working on the base of the skull. The textbooks always described it as one layer.
And it's not.
Recent research shows it's actually made of 2 distinct layers. And for a surgeon doing, say, a cranial reconstruction, knowing that is critical to avoid damage. So even in an area we think we know perfectly, we're still refining the details.
Amazing. Okay, what about moving the eyes?
The extra-ocular muscles.
Yep.
There's 6 of them controlling eye position. You've got 4 rectus muscles, inferior, medial, superior, and lateral, that move the eye in straight lines, basically.
Up, down, left, right?
And then you have 2 oblique muscles, superior and inferior, that help with the rotational movements. It takes a whole team of cranial nerves to manage that.
Which ones?
Nerves 3, 4, and 6. You need all 3 for that incredibly precise control.
Okay, so that's face, chewing, eyes. What about swallowing?
Right. We have the extrinsic tongue muscles, all ending in glossus like genioglossus, hyoglossus. They're vital for speech and just moving food around in your mouth.
And then to actually swallow.
It's a chain reaction. The pharyngeal constrictors started off squeezing the food down your throat. And they get help from the laryngeal elevators, which pull the larynx up.
I find the palatal muscles so interesting. The fact that they can pull open the auditory tube.
Yes.
That's why you chew gum or swallow when a plane is taking off.
That's the mechanism. It's
Yeah.
literally built into the act of swallowing. It helps you equalize that pressure in your middle ear.
So smart. Okay, before we leave the neck, what's left?
The anterior neck muscles.
Yeah.
They're grouped based on where they are relative to the hyoid bone. You have the digastric, which has two bellies and helps open your mouth by pulling the mandible down.
And a big one.
And the big one, the sternocleidomastoid.
That's that big strap of muscle you can see on the side of your neck.
That's the one. If you use both of them together, you flex your neck forward powerfully. But if you just fire one side,
It does that cool combination move.
it does. It bends your neck to that same side, but then rotates your face to the opposite side. It's a very unique action.
All right, let's transition. Group 2. The muscles of the vertebral column. We're going deep now, right?
Very deep. We're talking about the intrinsic or true back muscles, the ones that connect and stabilize the vertebrae themselves. And these are all innervated by the dorsal rami of the spinal nerves.
And the book lays them out in 3 layers, from superficial to deep.
Correct. The first, most superficial layer is mainly the splenius muscles. Their job is to extend and bend the neck sideways.
And below that.
The intermediate layer. This is the heart of the back, really, the erector spinae. A huge, powerful group that extends your spine.
The ones that keep you standing up straight.
Exactly. And you can think of them as 3 columns running up your back. From the inside out, it's spinalis, longissimus, and iliocostalis.
And their action depends on whether you use one side or both.
Precisely. If they both contract bilaterally, you get that powerful extension. If just one side contracts, you get lateral flexion. You bend sideways.
But the real magic for stability is in the deepest layer, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The deep layer, the transversospinalis group, these are much shorter muscles, like the myelophysis and the rotatories. They only span a couple of vertebrae at a time.
So they're not for big, powerful movements.
Not at all. They're the fine-tuning system for your spine.
Making tiny adjustments.
Delicate rotational and positional adjustments, segment by segment. This is so important for balance and preventing injury. And, this gets to a huge clinical point. When these little deep muscles get injured from, say, poor posture or a sudden strain, they can get into this awful cycle of pain and spasm.
A lot of back pain starts there.
So much of it does. It just highlights why things like targeted warm-ups and stabilization exercises are so critical. It's about training these deep, small muscles.
So we've seen this huge group of muscles for extension. Why so few for flexion? Why does the body seem to skimp on the intrinsic flexors?
There are a couple of great reasons, actually. First, you don't really need them for that job because big trunk muscles do the heavy lifting for flexion, which we'll get to.
And the second reason?
It's gravity. I mean, think about it. Most of your body weight, your organs, your chest, it's all anterior to the spine. Gravity is already pulling you into flexion.
So you don't need a lot of muscle to help it along.
Exactly. So the list of dedicated flexors is short. The longus capitis and longus colon up in the neck, and the quadratus lumborum in the lower back.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to group 3. The oblique and rectus muscles. The walls of the trunk.
Right. These are the muscles between your spine and your belly button. The obliques tend to compress and rotate you, while the rectus muscles are your primary flexors.
Starting at the top again, in the neck.
In the neck, you have the scalenes. They help lift your first 2 ribs when you breathe in hard, and they also help flex the neck. Then, in the chest, between the ribs, you have the intercostals.
Intercostals are essential for breathing.
Absolutely fundamental. They expand and compress the rib cage.
Now, the abdominal wall is just an amazing piece of engineering.
It's like plywood. You have the external oblique and the internal oblique with their fibers running in opposite directions, crossing over each other.
That creates incredible strength, right?
Immense strength.
Yeah.
It lets them compress the abdomen and rotate the trunk. And then the deepest one is the transversus abdominis, which just runs straight across like a corset.
And down the middle, the six-pack muscle.
That's your rectus abdominis. It runs straight up and down. It's your main vertebral flexor. And it's divided by that white line, the linea alba, and then those horizontal lines.
The tendinous inscriptions.
That's what gives it that segmented look.
We also have to include the diaphragm in this group.
Yes, developmentally it's linked. And it is, without a doubt, the single most important muscle for life. This big dome that separates your chest from your abdomen.
And its contraction is breathing in.
Right. It flattens out, which increases the volume of your chest and pulls air in. Then when it relaxes, it domes back up, volume decreases, and you breathe out.
This whole system of compression and pressure directly leads us to a big clinical topic, hernias.
It does. When you contract those abdominal muscles really hard, like when you're lifting something heavy and holding your breath, the pressure inside your abdomen can spike up to 100 times normal.
100 times, wow.
And that intense pressure can find any weak spot in the wall. A hernia is just an organ, usually a bit of intestine, poking through an abnormal opening.
And there are two main types we should know.
The first is an inguinal hernia. It's way more common in males. Basically, abdominal contents push into the inguinal canal.
Which is already a natural weak spot because of development.
It is. It's the path the testes take during descent. The other main type involves the diaphragm itself. It's called a diaphragmatic or hiatal hernia.
That's when the stomach slides up into the chest.
Exactly. Usually through the esophageal hiatus, the normal opening for the esophagus. They are incredibly common, and while they might not cause symptoms, they can really make things like GERD or chronic heartburn much worse.
Because that natural barrier is compromised.
The seal isn't as good.
Okay, that brings us to our fourth and final group, the pelvic floor.
The muscles of the perineum and the pelvic diaphragm.
Yeah.
This is the muscular floor of the pelvis, spanning from your tailbone to your pubic bones.
And they have what, 3 main jobs?
3 vital functions, really. 1, they support all the pelvic organs. 2, they help flex the sacrum and coccyx. And 3, they give you voluntary control over urination and defecation.
The anatomy here gets organized into triangles, right?
It does. If you draw an imaginary line between your ischial tuberosities, your sit bones, it divides the whole area, the perineum, into an anterior urogenital triangle and a posterior anal triangle.
And each triangle has its own diaphragm.
Sort of. The front one, the urogenital triangle, contains the urogenital diaphragm. It's a layer of muscle that strengthens the floor and, most importantly, it encircles the urethra to form the external urethral sphincter.
That's your voluntary control for urination.
That's the one. And in the back, the posterior triangle has the larger pelvic diaphragm. This includes the levator ani and coccygeus muscles, and it's the main support structure for everything. The key takeaway is these muscular sphincters around the urethra and anus are what give us conscious control.
Wow. That was a truly comprehensive dive. I mean, we went from the tiny muscles that make you smile all the way down to the complex floor of the pelvis.
We really covered the whole axis.
From a glance to the deep stabilizers of the spine, the huge role of the diaphragm, and that intricate pelvic architecture.
And I think the central lesson here, if you take one thing away, is the layered design of the body. You see it especially in the back. You have a superficial layer for big movements, that intermediate erector spinae for powerful stabilization, and then that deep transversospinalis layer for tiny, precise adjustments.
Power and control all working together.
It's how you get both powerful macro motion and indispensable micro control at the same time.
So, as a final thought for everyone to take away, considering how vulnerable the abdominal wall is and the role pressure plays in causing hernias, what does that tell you? What does that say about the trade-offs in our own architecture? You have this incredibly strong design, like the crisscrossing fibers of the obliques, but at the same time, you have to have these necessary openings, like the inguinal canal or the esophageal hiatus.
It's a fascinating tension, isn't it? The tension between structural integrity and, well, necessary function. That really defines our axial core.
Think about that. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the axial musculature.
We hope this knowledge serves you well.